Assalamu alaikum. So inshallah we can get started. Sorry for the delay. Um, so so as most of you know, this is a retreat that we try to do every few months or so, just gather together, have discussions, uh, try to share some of the fruits we've learned from the discussions leading up to this retreat that we have in the groups, the separate groups that we have, which of course, if you want to join on Fridays or those other discussions, please feel free to join those opportunities as well. But this theme we selected for this retreat is the straight path, Ihdina Sirat al-Mustaqim from Surah Fatiha. And really, I guess the idea is when we look at ourselves in the world, like how do we see humans? How do we like describe humans or measure humans? Like one of the ways we can maybe describe a human is like we seem to be different than animals. Like we can look at animals and then we look at humans, and there seems to be that our purpose is a little different. Because when I look at an animal, like a bee, it's born and then it starts gathering honey, starts doing its job, does everything very fast, very quickly. It's ready to do it. It's created in that way. It doesn't seem like the bee is choosing a path of should I be a good bee or a bad bee? Or should I be, I don't know, a disbelieving bee? It doesn't seem that a bee has these types of choices that it's making in its life. But then when I look at myself and humans, for us, the limitations are like a bee is limited kind of because it acts as a bee. It can't go and be like a tyrant or something. But when we look at a human, there almost seems to be no limitation into what a human can do. In terms of how oppressive I can be, how kind I can be, how right or wrong I can be. Physically, there seems to be no limitation, even like emotionally or like through the choices I make. I'm given an open field. I can do whatever I like. So when I compare myself to an animal, I see that we have different purposes. There's different paths that we're on. So for humans, it's important, this idea of a straight path. Like how I'm not physically given limitations. I'm able to choose as I wish. However, there is this concept of a sharia or a law, or there's concept of a path we should be on. A sharia can also be understood as a path. So how then am I supposed to stay on this path? Because I can choose to get off this path. I can choose to disbelieve. I can choose to become a tyrant or oppress myself or commit wrongdoing. So the idea is we're trying to understand is how do I stay on this path? What does the Quran teach us about staying on this path? What does the prophets teach us about staying on this path? And just trying to understand the straight path and see how it's relevant to our lives. And the way we're going to approach this is these three, I say, emotions. So desires, or kuway shahawiyya, anger, kuway ghadabiyya, which means power of appetites, or power of desires, power of anger, and then power of intellect. What was intellect's one? Aqliya, kuway aqliya. So these are the three emotions, feelings that we're going to try to understand what being on the straight path in these are. Of course, there can be many others, but these are kind of just the ones that are traditionally used and thought about, and also we wanted to look into. Bismillah. So power of animal appetites is the desires, the first session. Inshallah, the roadmap will be, first understanding what is power of animal appetites. It's not a familiar term. Animal appetites, desires, we can maybe substitute it for. But what is this? Like, what does this include? How do I see this in my life? How do I read it through Quranic guidance? Does Quran give me guidance on how do I deal with these desires? How do I stay on a straight path with these desires? And then also we're going to look at prophethood. Like, what does prophethood teach us? Versus philosophy, or versus maybe what the current ideology of the society might teach us. How does prophethood teach us to be on a straight path? And the goal is for us, first and foremost, for like myself and then the group and everyone here. But the goal is like, how do I live my life better, more as like a worshiper, or more as meaningful, content, where I'm not in despair or sorrow, all these things. So that's what we're trying to see. Because I think even before starting this discussion, the straight path, it was always there. But it was a very external concept. It wasn't something I saw practically useful, maybe in my day-to-day life. but I think it can be something that can be helpful in your day-to-day life. So first, let's try to understand what does power of animal appetites mean. A quick Google search, I mean, this is what comes up, just what animals would like, I guess. Animals eat, I guess the dog will want food, the lizard want that, and then I think that's an anteater, I'm not even sure. But basically animals eating something. But I'm a human, so I don't think this description would fit for me, but maybe it's saying I, as a human, want to eat some things like an animal would like to eat. But I think what we can understand for animal appetites, what the most obvious one was shahwa, or desire, lust. That's the first obvious one. But I'm thinking the next ones that, so we're studying for Imam Nursi, but the next ones that he says are less obvious, but also very important. Eating and drinking is a desire. Maybe you never even thought about it, but eating and drinking is it's a appetite. It's an animal appetite. It's a desire. Sleeping, I never would have thought of sleeping as a desire, to be honest. It's just you get tired, you go to sleep. There's not much happening there, it seems. And then there's even other comforts. Like we can go more general, like comforts that I seek, like nice car, I want a home, my aspirations at work, my career, university. I want to do well at school because of this and this. But really, what are the desires there? Those can also be desires. And then obviously we can go to greed and jealousy. These are also different types of desires that we can have. At the foundation of it, there's like some need or something I have in me that I want to fulfill. And I go after it. There's a certain type of path. So in short, I think the way we can, I mean, even Nursi uses this, the way we can say what power of animal appetites is anything that we do to attract benefit. Like when we eat, it's kind of we're trying to attract a benefit. Drinking is the same way, sleeping in similar ways. So all these things that we have been given to kind of attract the benefit. I mean, if I didn't have, let's say, hunger, I wouldn't go and eat. I wouldn't bother with this thing called eating. If I didn't have thirst, I wouldn't go and drink. I'd be more like a rock. But because I do have hunger, I do have thirst, I do have aspirations and all these different things, like I even have this need for comfort, I have this need for other things, then because of that, I go and try to attract these benefits. I'm chasing after them. So those all fit under this umbrella of power of animal appetites. So some questions I think we should be thinking about as we're going through this is, first, let's confirm that. Is this something that I find in myself? These desires, these needs, is this something I have in me? That we have to start from there. I mean, it might seem very obvious. It's like, of course, everyone eats and drinks, but are you aware that you're eating and drinking? Are you aware that you get these desires, that they're given to you? And then if you're aware that they're given to you, you have them, how do I start making sense of this? Like, why do I have to eat? Why do I have to drink? Why do I have to sleep? All these different things that in my day-to-day life I'm doing so often. Why am I doing all of these things? And, we might also have this concept of, desires are bad. Animal appetites, even the wording of it, animal appetites, it's a bad thing. Like, should I just avoid it? Is it something I need to stay away from or limit as much as possible? It is supposed to be bad? Or maybe is there a purpose behind it that can be useful for me? And yeah, practically just what do I do with these things that I find in me? I wake up and then I have these needs I have throughout the day. Always throughout the day, like we spend so much time eating, sleeping, drinking. It covers 90% of the human life, basically. But so what do I do with them? Like how are these supposed to be useful for me?
Another question is that sorry. So what someone would ask, what's the problem? Like if you're not eating something haram or drinking something haram or fulfilling your desires or whatever in a non-halal way, what's the problem with that? Why can't I indulge with whatever God has provided me? Why is that making me closer to an animal? Or why are we describing this as an animal appetite? I think someone can ask this question as well.
Yeah, very good question. Inshallah, hopefully we'll be able to touch on those. I mean, before even the next slide, I had a question. So first of all, I mean, as I said, when I say animal appetites, it almost sounds like degrading, like animal appetites. It's not something we want, but I mean, we have these feelings. So, I mean, the first question is also, I think even before these questions, it's like, why are we even discussing this? Is this a problem? Like, if there's no problem with these desires, these appetites, if there's no problem with me eating, drinking, sleeping, and doing whatever I've been doing up to this age, then I don't think we need to discuss anything because you don't have a problem. But I think first we need to ask, I want to ask you, Atik, like, do we have a problem when we are living it with these animal appetites? Like, how can it turn into a problem for us? Can I just live it in an animalistic way, just doing whatever animals are doing, and it not being an issue for me?
Well, I think certainly the answer is no, but I think there are two main differences between human beings and animals. The first being that animals are very instinctual. They learn things maybe on their own. They know how to behave. They know maybe what foods they would like to eat. They don't make a real choice like, oh, I prefer this over maybe that. It's more instinctual. However, human beings, it seems that education, some sort of education beyond maybe formal education, is with us at every step of our lives. At every moment, we are learning maybe something new, some other thing to do. And even starting with just basic things. And a second difference that I think exists between human beings and animals is that we possess a consciousness, that we have a sense of self that animals do not. And I think to live in an animalistic way, it dehumanizes us and ignores the sense of consciousness that we have. And it would be, it's going against the purpose of why the human being was created.
Yeah, thank you. I think animal, I mean, just like we started, the bee, we're very different from a bee. But then when I look at an animal, like let's say cattle, a sheep, it's eating, it's sleeping, it's grazing the grass, it's seemingly enjoying its life. It doesn't really have a concept of what did I do last month, or last month there was some difficulty that it's not like having nightmares about that, or it's not thinking about the future, like who's going to provide for me, what am I going to do, what's going to happen in a week, a day, like how am I going to control like the events of my future. The sheep doesn't think about these things. But then as a human, I can't ignore the past or the future. Like my past, Nursi uses the term, it becomes a graveyard for me. Like wherever I'm going, the past is just there, like in the periphery. It's like a grave. All the things that I loved, all the things I enjoyed, they're all dying. My own life is dying. And I'm aware of that grave that's following me around, my past, and I can't ignore it. And then in my future, it's like a big storm in front of me. I have no clue what's going to happen. It's uncertain. I can't control it. It gives me anxiety. So I can't live these desires like an animal would live them, because I am not an animal in the sense that I think of the past and the future, and I have a much different purpose than them, as Atik mentioned. So first, looking at the Quran, does the Quran tell me how to make sense of these desires then? And it's interesting that we might go to one of the most known verses. Does everyone know this verse? Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Does anyone tell me the meaning of this verse? Anyone?
We pray to you when we ask for help.
Say that again.
I think it's we pray to you when we ask for help.
We pray to see.
Praise.
Oh, praise. Okay. Yes, it's. Can someone even expand on it? It's a little bit more detailed.
Yes.
Yeah, the you alone I wanted to emphasize, but yeah, that's the meaning. It's something that we say every day in our prayers. Let me bring the meaning up. You alone do we worship, and you alone we ask for help. We say this so often. And it's interesting. I think this would solve all of our problems, this verse. And you might say, I mean, come on, it's obvious what this verse means. You alone we worship, you alone we ask for help. What does it mean? I mean, let me ask. So what do you think this verse is telling you? Like, what does it tell you to do?
You only like worship Allah and you only go to Him when you need help.
Yeah, exactly. So the answer was, someone said, you only worship Allah, you only go to him. You don't believe in idols. You don't worship other idols, do you? You know? These are things like, yeah, it's simple. That's what it's telling me to do. And we're like, we try to do that. That's how we're trying to live. But then,
But-
oh,
Well, I mean, replying to the brother there. So if I'm not worshiping idols, like, okay, I'm submitted, I'm a Muslim, la ilaha illallah, and then why do I have to say this, every single prayer multiple times a day? Remind myself, iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Only you I worship, only you, only from you I ask help. Like, if it's, the Quran or the worships that we do every day are supposed to be kind of like meaningful to us, not just, that if there's like a reminder, it means I'm forgetting something. If there's like something that I have to be reminded of every single day, multiple times a day, it means I'm forgetting it. I'm transgressing. But then you ask yourself, but I'm not asking help from someone else. I'm not worshiping any idols. But then you look at this, then maybe I am doing that. Maybe you are worshiping something else, or maybe you are asking help from something else without even knowing that you are doing that. Or you're going through your day without remembering actually who's providing for you or who's providing whatever, like, it's not like, oh yeah, when I'm sick, or when someone else is sick, we sit and pray. But I think then we could have just read this when someone is sick, a special dua just for when someone is sick, we're asking help. But this is something we say every day, multiple times a day. It means it should have much more impact than just like, oh, it was for people who worshipped idols at the time of the Prophet. And that's what was, revealed to him to tell the people. So I think there's a much more meaning behind that.
Yeah.
That's what we're going like through.
yeah, exactly. So, I mean, asking ourselves questions, why is Quran telling me to, or why is my creator telling me to read this every day, so many times a day? It seems so simple. We're doing it. And then there's another verse. Now it's Quran saying something else to us. So would you like to read the Arabic, and then I'll read?
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أرأيت من اتخذ إلهه هواه أفأنت تكون عليه وكيلا. Have you seen the one who takes as his God his own desire? Then would you be responsible for him? So the ayah is telling us that we're taking something else as God. And here it's not talking about an idol, it's talking about our desires. So we're taking our desires, our God. What does that mean to me? So I think for me, a God, as we mentioned in the previous ayah, is something I worship and I seek help from. But here it's telling me I'm taking my desires as my God. Is that true? What does it mean to take your desires as your God, or the appetites that we talked about before? How can food become my God, or like the desire to eat or desire to drink or to sleep become my God? Or is it becoming my God? I think that's the question.
And also the next one.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أم تحسب أن أكثرهم يسمعون أو يعقلون إن هم إلا كالأنعام بل هم أضل سبيلا. Or do you think that most of them hear or reason? They are not except like livestock. Rather, they are even more astray in their way.
Yeah.
So we go back to that. So it's not us who brought this, the animal appetite. It's actually the Quran describing some people who take their desires as their gods or live like livestock. They don't think about future. They don't think about the past. They don't think about, the meanings of whatever they are doing, or the reasons behind what they are doing, or the causes of what they are doing. And these people are described in the Quran as the livestock, as animals.
Again, it's very interesting. I mean, the way Quran is explaining this, like previous verse, you alone we worship, you alone we ask for help. Now it's saying, have you seen those ones who take their desires as their own God? And we might say, yeah, back in 1400 years ago, those people, or maybe now, that society is doing it, or look at current, like, I don't know, Western world or something like this. Like, we're better though. We don't have that kind of view, but it might be something there. But this is very real talking to us, or Quran is asking us questions. It's even a question asked directly to me. So I should be like, wait, am I taking a desire as a God? Did I even know that my desire could become a god? Like, maybe I wasn't even aware of that concept that, oh, maybe I'm worshiping a desire. Maybe my desire has taken this position of a god for me. And, I love this, how Quran describes it as they're not except like livestock, like cattle. Rather, they are even more astray in their way. Like we were saying, you can't even live like a sheep could, or you can't live like cattle could, because your purpose is different. A cattle can go, and its purpose in life is to, through action, eat, sleep, and do all of its other things. But as a human, you can't just eat, sleep, and just live the action. You need to understand what you're doing. You need to understand the past and the future. How do you make sense of that? What's your place in that? So going back to now, going back to this verse, إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. You alone we worship, and you alone we ask for help. There's really this emphasis of you alone. There seems to be like alone. It has to be you, because we might say, yeah, I believe in God, but is it only God? Is it other things? So I want to ask the question, like, what's the problem if that I mess up on the alone part? Like, I say, yeah, I believe in God, I worship God, but maybe it's not alone. Like for me, I'm not conscious of the alone aspect, and it's going to other things. Like, what effect would this have on my life?
Well, I think first of all, I mean, when or what does it mean to not worship God alone? Like, what does it mean to worship something? I think to worship something or to believe something is God is to believe that he's the cause of whatever, like he's the cause of the causes. Let's say you ate something sweet, and you felt like this kind of like satisfaction after it, or your hunger has gone away, and you say, oh, this thing I ate, has satisfied me, or this water has quenched my thirst, or this something is so beautiful, is so sweet. So these are the good stuff, the good parts. And then the bad thing is like, we get struck by, I don't know, a virus or a disease or an earthquake or something, and we say that, oh, this virus is what causing the illness. This nature is angry at us and is giving us all these kind of disasters. And another thing is also, we as humans, we are causing this destruction in the nature, and the nature is again revolting against us or something. So then we become we become kind of like afraid of everything around us. We become like, we don't know the causes of whatever is going on, or we have different sources and different causes of whatever like is around us. And when you believe that, it means when you're afraid of something and thinking that it's the cause, you're actually calling it your God. Even for a simple example, like, your life, your job, your boss, if you're afraid of him and you think he's what's gonna promote you, he's what's gonna like bring you the success you need, or he's what's gonna give you the knowledge that you need, you're also taking your boss as your God. So I think anything around us, our life become literally miserable because we think we are in a constant battle of everything around us, like our boss, our friend, the nature, the food can be bad to us, medicine, oh, it's an experiment, it might help, it might not help. So, and I think I feel like taking all these things around us as it can become really a source of misery. Like, we don't know, like, if we don't go back to the real cause of all the causes, we don't go back and know whom we should ask for help. I cannot should I ask this medicine for help? Should I ask this doctor or this boss or this university or this whatever? So then I'm literally in a battle. And if I don't know where to go, what the cause is, then I will live in this misery.
Yeah, I think so. Now this paints like a very nice picture for us. When I don't live according to this verse, like when it's not only him I worship, what happens is, just as Sarah explained, like my workplace turns into a place where I face enemies. Like my boss becomes like, I need something from my boss, but they can't give it, or they're not giving it, or I need to do something to try to get it. And they become in some ways my enemy, or I'm subject to them. Now I'm like a slave of my boss. Or even myself, let's say I have a desire, I absolutely need to have a big house, like for example, like this. or I need to achieve this in my life. If I don't achieve this, then my life is worthless, it's pointless. My own desire, that now I'm like trying to do everything to fulfill that one desire, has so much control over me. It's kind of the thing I'm worshiping. It's my God, but it's also, you know, oppressing me. Like now I'm being oppressed with all these different things around me. So now this verse comes, and maybe it's supposed to, I think it can be saving us from this, like إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. Like, how does now this verse coming free me from all those chains? Like, how do I then break all of those chains and say, no, you're not oppressing me?
So I think I like to go back like to ayahs before this ayah. So not the
Oh,
slide. So you know we read Surah Al-Fatiha. We start with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. So, and again, what does it mean? Because for me to take God as the God that I need to ask for help, it means that I should acknowledge and I should witness, as we say, and I should know that He's the causer of all causes. He's what we say in the ayah, Rabbil Alameen. He is the Lord of, you know, the worlds. It means He's in control of everything. It means He's creating everything to me. So once I know that, once I acknowledge that, okay, then the conclusion would be, if I need help at any moment, you know, then I should go with the one who's controlling and creating every single thing around me. So the outcome would be that I will worship only Him then. I will ask for help only from Him. So, for example, practically, if I'm eating something, and as I mentioned, you know, I feel like, oh, this apple is so sweet, is so good. I feel so good afterwards. And if at that moment I don't realize that whatever I'm feeling and whatever has been created from this apple to me is not really from the apple itself, but was created at the moment from Rabbil Alameen, yeah, only then when I realize that, then I will be applying this ayah, that I am worshipping only You and I'm asking for help only from You. I think that's how, like how I understand it.
Yeah. And it's so freeing, actually. It's such a freeing verse because it says, stop being a slave, stop being oppressed or subjected by everything around you. Like, we've made our desires as our gods. We live as livestock, cattle. And for a human, it's a very inhumane way to live, to be the slave of multiple things, many things. But then this verse is there, you're not meant to be slaves to them. You're not meant to be oppressed by them. You don't need to be going to your boss to ask for help. You don't need to be going to this person or that person, or they're not your source of help. They're not your source of refuge. And it cuts away all those ties. So that now you go to the actual source. And I think this is probably one of the parts that stayed with me the most. I want to make this point that Nursi, when he talks about this verse, and he talks about worshiping, he says that when you say this verse, not only does it save you from being like the slave of everything else, but it also gives you this consciousness that just as I am worshiping Him, إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ, like I am a worshiper of Him, everything around me, like there's a we there, we worship. Everything around me is also worshiping. Like that thing I hate, or that thing I find to be like my enemy, whatever you can imagine, actually they're also being created. They're also a worshiper, whether conscious or not. But like, let's say an easier example is let's say like I'm trying to achieve something in my work, and to do that I need to do something, but it gives me anxiety, it's difficult for me to do. But then I look at this goal or task I'm trying to do, but even that task or that like that feeling, okay, let me stop, because when it's feelings it gets more complicated. But the point I'm trying to make here is not only am I worshiping, but everything around me is also worshiping. It's not me alone. I see that the whole world around me is also transforming into worshipers, things that are glorifying their creator. And this, like, for example, in the example of eating, let's say I feel hunger, and then there's like some cake there, and then now I'm like, oh, I don't want to eat that cake. And then this becomes like a source of like, now I have to struggle. I don't want to eat that cake. I don't want to this hunger is so heavy on me, but I don't want to eat that cake. The cake becomes sort of like an enemy for me. But like, I think we can use this verse there. It's like a playful example, but I'm like, this cake that might be my enemy, the thing that I'm trying to stay away from. It's actually also a creation of God. It's also worshiping through its qualities. It's telling me the names of my creator. It's telling me of a beautiful, perfect, ordered one. And then I see that it's not an enemy to me. It's also worshiping. Then I even look at that feeling within me, that hunger that I find in myself, because I didn't make my own hunger. It was there. I'm like, hey, that hunger also, the purpose of that hunger is not to be my enemy or to make me struggle or this. The purpose of it is also to point me to something. It is worshiping, and it's also there to point me to my creator, let's say, that hunger. Like the purpose there is they're not enemies of me. So this na'budu part, this we worship part, I think if we say it with consciousness during prayer and try to practice it, then we can see the angels of creation, where everything is glorifying, everything is worshiping. It can transform our worldview.
I just want to add one thing that, so na'bud, like this is, so even when, like in the Quran, it mentions that God has created us, or created us to worship him. خَلَقْتُ الْإِنسَ وَالْجِنَّ لِيَعْبُدُونَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ.
Yeah.
And so the idea is that we are supposed to be living in, the Arabic word would be ubudiyya, in a state of worship. And from what Brother Abdurrahman just said, so what does it mean? From, remembering Allah in everything you do, remembering the causes of things, is you're basically saying that you have to live in your purpose, to live in ubudiyya is basically to live in a way that at every moment you're conscious of your creator, you're conscious of your Lord. I think that's like I would say the essence of what we're alluding to in this this discussion.
Yeah, I think like this word worship, it can be like a word that we should dive into a little bit more. Like, what does it mean? I mean, worship, we understand it to be many things. Maybe we understand worship as prayer, as reading Quran, going to the masjid. These are the more maybe obvious ways we can think of worship, maybe fasting. But then the different kinds of like, what are the different, I mean, you kind of mentioned like this awareness of God that you are having, this ubudiyya, what does it mean? Actually, let me start from there. Like, what does it mean to be an abd? Like, to be in a state of ubudiyya, I guess first you have to understand what it means to be an abd. Could you talk about that?
Well,
abd is a slave, a worshiper, let's say.
yeah, it can mean a slave, it can mean a worshiper. So basically, if I'm a slave, I should know who like my Lord is, let's say. So a abd is someone who kind of like acknowledges that he has no, at least that's how I understand it, like he has no powers, he has no authority over things, even over like himself. So he has to like to go whenever, like at every moment, he has to go back to his Lord. He has a Lord and he has to go back to his Lord to sustain him, let's say.
Yeah.
That's how I understand what abd means.
And then also the second part, it says, you alone we ask for help. So going back to his Lord, is that also that the abd asks for help? Like worshiping is going back to his Lord, but then how does the asking for help part come after that?
Well, asking for help, it means I acknowledge that I am not the one, or the things around me are not the things that are, that cannot help me, cannot serve me. So I will be in full servitude to one Lord, let's say, and not to multiple things that I can take as Lords around me.
So like, I think what I understand from this verse is like, one of the meanings of worship is asking for help. Like
Yes.
whatever you go to ask for help is a form of worship you are doing. So if I go to my creator asking for help, making dua, making supplication, maybe even physically making dua, making supplication, I am in a state of worship. I am asking. So this question, I have were you going to say something?
No.
Oh, so I have this, we kind of briefly touched on in the beginning, but when we think of appetites, desires, generally we might see it as something we need to stay away from. We need to limit as little as possible, eat, sleep, drink, it should be minimal. Maybe it's kind of Sufi way of approaching it, or There's nothing good in these things. They need to be avoided. Is this what this verse is teaching us?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like, especially that we started the topic with animal appetite, like, oh, I shouldn't be an animal. Like, I should be away from all these desires. I don't know, eat the food without salt so I don't indulge in it, or avoid chocolate, maybe because, it gives me like such a good feeling when I eat chocolate, and maybe I'm forgetting my Lord when I eat chocolate, or I don't know, some other, lusts or desires or whatever that to be honest, we actually cannot live without them. So even, like you cannot live without food, you cannot live without sleep. So the question becomes now, how can I approach this from like what we're talking about? Like becomes a means of worship to me. How can these desires become a means of worship to me and not become just something that I will lustfully indulge with in this world and forget anything about my Lord or myself or the afterworld. So I think that's the question. So it becomes like we're talking about إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. After it comes اهدنا الصراط المستقيم. Okay, where is now the صراط المستقيم? How can I approach, or how can I reach the صراط المستقيم? How these desires that I am created with, so it's something that I cannot, like, it's part, as we say, of the divine order. So I need to eat, I need to sleep, I need to drink, I need to do this, I need to procreate. So how can all desires become like a means of worship to me instead of like basically just lusts that transcend, like not transcend me, but like degrade me into an animal, let's say.
Like kind of as we said in the beginning, if I didn't have hunger, I wouldn't eat. If I didn't have thirst, I wouldn't drink. And I'd be like a rock, I don't sleep, I don't do anything, I just sit there. So these appetites, animal appetites, the power of animal appetites, even like this ability to have an appetite, it's given to us. Like the purpose of it is not to kill it, get rid of it. It's supposed to be used in a correct way. And the way it's supposed to be used is as a form of worship. Like you do your worship through eating, through drinking, through even sleeping. It can be a form of worship because it's something you have a need to do. The problem is when it stops being a form of worship, and maybe even you start worshiping that desire itself, or you see that the desire is the thing you're looking for. We have 2 comments.
Thank you. The ring comes with perks. So I was just thinking, I was thinking of cats. Cats eat, sleep. If they're not spayed, cats can have babies, right? And like eating and sleeping, that's all they do. At least like house cats, the cats that I'm accustomed to, like, they don't even really know how to genuinely hunt insects or mouses. Like if my sister's cat saw a mouse, she'd probably be scared. So then the cat is not doing anything degrading in and of itself. Like it's performing its catness to the perfect degree, So then if someone were to say, oh, Aisha, like, don't be a cat, initially we might be like, well, the cat's not something terrible. Like it's kind of living a nice life, I guess. But I guess the reason why we, and I'm including myself in this, we say things like, don't degrade yourself like an animal, is because the animal is filling up its cup completely, its capacity completely. But I've been given a bigger cup beyond. I've been able to think about the act of sleeping, think about the act of eating, think about the very existence of the desires beyond just fulfilling them or completing them, right? And it's when I don't use that given faculty to think about them or reflect over their very existence, which has not been given to the cat, so it's not obligated with that. It performs its own worship perfectly. Then there's a sort of almost responsibility that I am not living up to, perhaps, right? Like my cup is this big, but I'm only using like the tiny bit of it, perhaps. Or the typical example of like the phone can use and has all the access to everything in the world. I use it to send like a meme to someone, right?
So that was going to be the question that I will ask. So what's wrong with being an animal? Because you're saying that degrading human to animals, but maybe I'm okay with being animal because in Philadelphia subways, certain like alcohol brands, they are advertising it with be like an ape. So it looks like for certain companies, we should become like apes by drinking alcohol or whatever. So what's wrong with that? But Sister Shanur addressed this. But the verse that you shared was saying that even worse than animal. So what does it mean to be even worse than animal? Like, is it possible for me to be an animal really? Because the verse was saying like livestock or even more like lower than that. What does that mean? Because like the way Sister Shanur put it, I have a capacity, but I'm just using a fraction of it as much as an animal would. But what does it mean? Not even like an animal, then in this case.
Would you like to answer?
Well, I guess I just understand it that as a belief that other creatures also worship God and glorify God, like kullu shay'in yusabbihu bismillah. Well, so even if I don't see it, these cats or whatever livestock or animals which are fulfilling like the task that they are meant to fulfill in this world to the maximum capacity, or at this, like they are, even if I don't see it, they are worshiping, they are glorifying God. So, and here, if I'm worse than them because I am not like, I forget, or when I'm fulfilling these desires, when I think I'm living like an animal, I'm worse than an animal because I'm forgetting to worship and I'm forgetting to glorify like God. I think that's how I understand it. So that's like the part of the cup that I'm not filling,
Yeah, I think exactly. One, I would say that looking at animals, them living, eating, sleeping, drinking like livestock, that's their form of glorification. When I look at them, I don't see a bee as, oh, what a stupid bee or what an unbelieving bee or it's living so worthlessly. I see a beautiful bee. I see it's reflecting beautiful names to me. So much meaning there, so much ability and design and beauty just in a little bee or in a sheep. Like so much mercy. I see the relationship between the sheep and its children. So like when I look at animals, I see them as glorifying. The problem is when I try to live like an animal, an animal, its purpose is it's acting. It has limitations, as we said in the beginning. It can't just choose any path at once. But as a human, I don't have those limitations. I can choose whatever path I want. And if I choose the path of living like an animal, where I just try to only follow my desires, only act according to my desires, don't think about, to try not to think about anything else, I can't do it. Like as a human, I'm not able to forget about the past. I'm not able to forget about the future. I have these questions of why do I exist? Why is this happening to me? And then furthermore, the warnings are there. Like when I only eat and drink and live my life that way, I have this dread building up inside of me. Like I'm given those warnings as well. And if I keep jumping more into desires and pleasure and comfort, it just makes it worse and worse. And I try to block it out more and more. I live in this cycle of hell. I made for myself this cycle of hell. So I'm much worse than an animal. I can't be as happy as a dog just by oh, I have a nice owner or something. The dog is so happy and enjoys life, and you're like, oh, I wish I could be like the dog, but you can't. Like you have those worries, you have those problems that you need to think about. And you can be even more happy than a dog, even more more conscious, much more conscious than a dog of the names, like of your creator, but you can't, it requires being on the straight path, like choosing a path. So
yeah. So I think the question is what is the straight path, or how to get to the straight path, or also how can these desires that we called animal appetites become, our means to the straight path? Yeah.
Right. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. So I guess from my understanding then, like we're trying to seek some sort of fulfillment from these desires, but fulfilling these desires on their own isn't going to produce that fulfillment. Like I keep trying, but I don't seem to be getting there. So I guess it seems like the straight path would be whatever is going to fulfill these like desires or fulfill all my general needs in the shortest way. And so from what we've been discussing, it seems that, you know, taking these desires and connecting them to my creator, to the one who gave me these needs and gave me the means to fulfill them, seems to be the shortest path. But I guess I'm not sort of totally convinced, if I'm being honest, just because it seems like with the example of the apple, for instance, I'm hungry, I see an apple, I eat it, and that brings me a level of fulfillment. And that seems like a very short, straight path. And I find myself, for example, if I forget to say Bismillah before eating the apple, it's sort of me catching myself. And it seems like I've taken this sort of roundabout way to reach the realization that, oh, it's not the apple that's like ultimately fulfilling me. So it seems like I have to take these extra steps to like really think about, oh, this type of food, this apple isn't the one fulfilling my need, or it's not me studying really hard for an exam that leads to like a good grade, for example. So I guess taking the question and throwing it back at you guys kind of, but is it really that this is the shortest straight path? Like, is it really a straight path, I guess, is what I'm trying to ask. And does it really seem direct? Is it direct to people? So
I'm supposed to answer. What's that in the script? Ooh, okay. So, I mean, I can understand that it might not sound like, you know, easy to whenever you're doing something to be like conscious of who's providing this for you, whether it's, you know, the feeling so of hunger, which is the desire that you have. So who's creating this to me? You know, it's because then you will have to ask yourself a lot of questions, right? And also like who's the apple, if you see, or the food, who's providing this to me? And then the feeling of satisfaction after eating that, also who has created that to me? But then if everything, I think it becomes easier for me because everything points to the same, like why it's called this, like I think I would say, because everything points to the same like source. So if you already know that there is like one source, one sustainer, one supplier, I think it becomes easier. Because yes, you might think, I mean, it's just an apple, you know, like what's the problem if I said, oh, this satisfaction or this sweetness is like apple is the source of that? Because I think it doesn't stop on the apple, because then it's, as we mentioned before, then you like now at this moment, the apple became your sustainer. At another moment, another thing, another food or another problem or another boss or another, you know, medicine will become your sustainer. So the problem becomes, so it's not at this moment, but when you start attributing, you know, the causes to like everything is a cause of something. I think that's a problem. That's when you live like in a constant battle and struggle. When you, it might sound difficult to every time, you know, reminding yourself or reminding ourselves that there is one sustainer, one creator of everything I'm feeling, and I'm, you know, all the capacities or faculties that I have, and all the feelings that I have. But I think it is way harder. I will be way more miserable if I had like, actually, you cannot even count it, because you have an infinite number of sustainers or lords that you will go to every time you will need something. I think that's where the problem comes up. But I don't know.
so if I'm understanding it correctly, if I view something other than my Lord as my sustainer, it may seem like the shortest conclusion at the time,
Yes.
right? But I'll eventually inevitably hit a roadblock. Like I can't take this like sustainership of the apple any farther than a certain point, and then inevitably I'll have to look to other sources, like, oh, if it's not the apple, then it must be something else, and I can keep going like that. And what seemed like very direct and straightforward at the time actually just took me like way in a direction that's just an endless cycle of basically misery because I'm not finding what it is that's ultimately fulfilling me.
Yeah. I mean, another thing, it's like, so these are things that, as Abdurrahman mentioned, these are things that we're doing every day, you know, eating, sleeping, and drinking. 90% of our time is occupied by these things. And it becomes like, you know, like if I define worship as just like praying and fasting and, you know, saying some du'as at some moment, it feels like my life is kind of like 90% of my life is actually allocated to how to say, sustaining my physical needs of eating and sleeping and whatever, and worship is something completely different. Then you ask, then I'm supposed I mean, I'm created to worship. How that doesn't make sense, you know? If I'm created to worship and at the same time I was created with all these desires, how am I supposed to be worshiping God? And then I think the understanding would be is that actually through these desires, this is how you can be worshiping God. Like this is how it can make sense when you're actually a worshiper. You're created to worship. It means you're supposed 90% of your time or all your time you're supposed to be worshiping. It means, you know, eating maybe can become, you know, like a way of worship. That's how I would understand it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting because I also often see this dichotomy of like, you know, if you're not praying or like doing one of like these ritual acts of worship, praying, fasting, like anything you do outside of that is like taking time away from what you could be doing to like extra acts of worship, sunnah prayers, things like that. So it's not that, you know, these like desires are, you know, taking away from something. They're like given to you for a reason. You have to, they are needs that have to be fulfilled for us to have some sort of like contentment in this life at least. And so I guess kind of viewing them as like in relation to this verse as well, guide us to the straight path, as also a means of guidance. So maybe we can think about like sort of trying to see, you know, this need for food, for sleep as sort of ways to like ask for help from our creator and not the things that we think are fulfilling these needs. Like the food itself or the sleep itself, like, you know, I have to sleep a certain number of hours in a day to function properly. So rather than saying, you know, I should try to cut myself off from these things in order to reach this straight path, instead saying these are
The means.
yeah, exactly, these are means or maybe doors that I can use to reach my creator as well.
And that's by being conscious of my creator when I am like doing these, like eating or sleeping or doing any of these acts. Yeah. I don't know if the brothers have more to add.
I can say something. I wanted to, were you gonna get to the ihtinam part, like the guide us part? Okay, then I will say something.
Yeah, actually, that kind of brings us to sort of like exactly sort to the guidance. So like, do I actually feel like I'm being guided, or is there like guidance? Is there guidance in my life? Is there guidance through sort of these desires that we feel? And so I'll pose that question to you, Sarah, or anyone.
No, I just I want to like just reiterate something before we move on to, you know, like other things like to reach the Sirat al-Mustaqim is that I just want to emphasize on that, like we are not trying to say that you should, you know, again, like you should live your life away from like these desires, you know, like you shouldn't like, so I feel like, you know, in this world, like there's either like, and maybe we'll talk about this later, but my point is that the idea here is that your desires can be and should be a means of worship. You know, it's not just and we're not saying that you shouldn't pray and you shouldn't do your sunnah and whatever. That's also fine and good. We're just saying that you're spending a lot of time of your day doing other things that you think have nothing to do with worship, and they are just fulfilling your, you know, physical needs, but they actually can be means of worship, means for you to what we're studying before, to realize the names of your creator. We just have to be, it must, I mean, it can be hard because like we also mentioned this before, like when you pray also every time, you cannot pray with khushu' every time, you know, like it's very hard to do that every single time you pray, but then you try, you know, you remind yourself. So I think with this, like this is just for like a reminder for us that this can be a means of worship, how it can become a means of worship, and then we should like try to make it this like a means of worship for us. Yeah.
I guess Atika's also. We can use this one too, but if you want, yeah.
Can I see it and then you can just repeat it for my cue?
It's fine. I already walked.
I was just thinking about what Sara just said, and it does make me think about how, you know, like 1/3 of my day, or it should be ideally, right, is spent sleeping. Right, 8 hours. Maybe not of everyone's 8 hours, but and that would equal to like 1/3 of my life in one respect. So it begs the question of, is 1/3 of my life meant to just be a sort of a spent on a physical necessity that is otherwise spiritually, let's say, or consciously wasted, right? Like, okay, it's physically necessary, but beyond that, there it goes. And even if we're thinking about parts of my day where I am conscious, like eating, we recognize this during Ramadan, like so much of my day is spent eating too, you know, add in a few hours there. And then that leaves very little. So I guess it raises the question of, is the amount of my time in which, yes, I'm supposed to be like aware of God and whatnot, but that's just a small segment of my day, and my day is a microcosm of my life. So how do I turn these acts that, whether I want to or I don't, I will have to do them, like I have to sleep, right? How do they become transformed? How can they become transformed into meaningful parts of my life that don't feel wasted, but are worshiping, that are manifestations of worship to my creator, right? What sort of reflection should I engage with them? And this goes for all of the other sort of whatever else falls under this umbrella of animal appetites. We have a question here, and then also.
So I have a question, like, mashallah, you guys have been explaining like how we need to like see our desires and everything. So I'm asking from a point of view that what if desires are not fulfilled? Like, what is the meaning of desire then? Like, for example, someone that is poor, they desire good food, or like they desired all of those good things, and all of those things are not being fulfilled in their lives. So how do I navigate that? Like when my desires are not fulfilled, and how do I get to the right path or the straight path?
Is there something else? I think I'm not sure your desires can ever be fulfilled if you're seeking fulfillment from that desire. Like, yeah, when you're poor, it's more clear. You know, I want a car. if I can't afford a car that maybe Atiq can afford, then I feel very sad. But let's say I could afford that car. And then do you think that desire will be fulfilled? Well, yeah, you get the car, but what's like the desire there? Maybe you seek some beauty in your life. Maybe you seek some type of perfection or some value. You want to be valuable. So you get this car. You know, you have some type of desire within you. You're seeking something, you get this car. But I don't think anything you keep trying to do like this, it's never going to fulfill you. I think here the topic is it's not about physically getting something, because the second you make it about getting a desire, getting that result, I need that car, I need this job, I need to achieve this, I need for it to be this way, you know, why is it like this? Then you've made that desire into a god for you in some way, like you're worshiping it. You need it to provide for you something. And here, it's supposed to break that shackle where it doesn't matter if you're the poorest person in the world, you still want something. Rather than looking at the result of it, you say, my creator is the one I worship, not this car, not this thing, not this politician or something else, or why are they doing this? Like, no, I don't worship you, I worship my creator. And there's a lot of physical ways of worshiping too. You know, like it's not just sitting and saying, oh, I only worship my creator. It's when I go out and live my life, still living with that consciousness, trying to. I mean, we're calling it a straight path because obviously we can veer off that path very easily. So we're trying to go on that straight path. I mean, that's generally what my answer to that. Did you have a comment? Or?
No, well, I said.
Okay.
Great question.
Yeah, okay. I will take one last question and then
I just wanted to follow up on your question. You could say that these needs, sleep, eating, and all that stuff, you could turn it into a good thing by saying the dua for eating, saying the dua for sleeping. That's why we all do that. Being thankful for eating what you have, being thankful for sleeping that much, getting a good sleep. It's like that. And also to the apple, what's it called? The example, you have the desire to eat, right? But that apple is also created by God. So basically, you're technically kind of doing the right thing by fulfilling that desire. And then you should thank God that you had that resource to fulfill your desire. You know?
Okay.
So,
I mean, this discussion on needs and desires, I feel, but maybe I'm wrong, that we are created with the same needs as animals, right? We need to eat, we need to sleep. We have all these needs that we need to satisfy in order to be alive. But I feel that, for example, my cat will eat in order to live, but my cat doesn't kill for fun, while humans do. You know, we can have these needs that are deadly to other creatures, right? So probably the only creature on earth who really indulge in desires and needs, it's man. I don't know. But maybe this is going in another direction.
I just wanted to say that I mean, it is, I don't want to sound like, I mean, it's a domestic cat, but if you look outside, animals do kill each other to eat. You know, there's the chain, what do you call the food chain, where and that's what, you know, this our life, we're not supposed to live it you know, in the woods, in the where there's this food chain where you know, might is right. What you call it? Might,
right.
you know, the lion would eat whatever the deer, and the deer would eat. So I feel saying, I mean, yes, humans maybe, I don't know if humans are really the only creatures that really kill for. Maybe they go hunting for fun. I don't know, but to say that animal, my point is, so we are saying that we shouldn't be away from these desires, and then we shouldn't live like animals and, you know, kill for fun or something. But at the same time, we have what we call the divine order. Like we have something that, you know, I am created. So I cannot say, like Aisha said, we have 1/3 of our day spent sleeping. I cannot say, oh, I don't want to sleep, you know, because ultimately, if I don't sleep for a few days, I'm gonna like maybe literally die. Yeah. So I cannot say I don't want to eat anymore. These are needs that I didn't decide that, you know, that they should be there. I was created this way. I feel part of being a worshiper, part of being a abd is accepting that I live within this divine order, that I live within, you know, the needs of eating and sleeping and drinking and needing like family, needing, you know, a husband, I accept this because this is how I have been created. Now the idea is how to not indulge in these and making them ways of worship. I think that's what we're trying to get to here. Yeah.
I guess also kind of tying it back to ihdina or guidance. I think we can observe certain like boundaries that are already created for us in terms of all these needs, in terms of how we feel when, like, for example, as Qadir was saying, like a need for wealth not being fulfilled versus having maybe excess wealth still doesn't seem to solve sort of the need. So I think like these feelings that we get can also serve as sort of signposts or like guidance that, you know, I do feel hunger. And if I eat to a certain extent, or I'm given the means to like fulfill that hunger, then I feel a certain level of contentment. But then if I view the food as sort of the source of that contentment and I try to eat more and go past sort of the boundary that is comfortable for me, then I observe that, you know, I'm uncomfortable again because I've eaten too much. So I think in this sense, we do have this sort of guidance placed in us about sort of, you know, what are the boundaries that you know, are sort of best suitable for us in terms of like in terms of thinking about these needs. And if I don't, like Abdurrahman is saying, like if I look to the sort of fulfillment of these needs in and of themselves, I think, you know, you kind of lose some of that guidance, like these feelings you get about the needs themselves serves as an important, I think, sort of sign. And I think, you know, nowadays it's a lot, I feel like the message is, you know, you should just like ignore these feelings or try to feel like good. Like you shouldn't sit with something that feels uncomfortable or bad for you. You should do everything you can to feel good. Whereas, you know, the quote unquote bad feelings too, like that you might feel if you don't get something fulfilled, is also an important message that deserves to be read accordingly. So yeah, just wanted to
Thank you.
point
Very
that.
beautiful. Is it a question or a comment?
Both.
I think we have 20 minutes, so I hope we have time at the end for questions and comments. So is it very relevant to this? Okay, you know what? I'll just hear it, but
So, you know, the sister behind was saying that she doesn't know if cats or animals are the only, she says that we are the only ones it seems like we're the only ones who indulge in hunting for fun. But interestingly enough, there's a study where they put cameras to cats' collars and they filmed, they saw how much they killed, right? And they say 80% of cat killings are not to eat. So they say cats are serial killers. They don't hunt just for fun or just to eat, but that was it. I'll hold my other one for that.
thank you for that insight. I think my comment there is definitely as humans, we know our responsibility. So when I look at myself, I know I can make choice, right or wrong, and I have that responsibility. When I look at animals, it's less clear to me what their choices are, because for them it seems very like they're like we've been saying cattle have limitations, bees have limitations. It doesn't seem like they can really veer off the path too much. I mean, Imam Nursi does say in some places they even have a responsibility with their choices. So that can be true. But what I for sure know is I have a responsibility in how I make my choices and how I stay on a path. And, we're talking about guidance. Like when I get off that path, I need guidance to get back on. I need guidance to stay on it. I need help. So that's what I know. But yeah, cats are interesting. So we looked at the verses. We're trying to understand kind of the straight path through the verses, but also I think briefly touching on prophethood. Like, what is the path of prophethood that brings us to this straight path? And then maybe the idea is what's opposite of prophethood, or what are we in maybe now? And Imam Nursi, he uses the term philosophy. He uses philosophy versus prophethood. But I think philosophy, we can understand it to be just maybe the normal current societal ideology that we live in. Like, yeah, pleasure yourself, go and get the most pleasure from everything, look for your comfort, seize all of these material wealths. Like, that's kind of the world we live in. Do your best, have an amazing career so that now you can retire and just enjoy your life and be like living in wealth or something. This is kind of the mindset that we live in. And in this mindset, it seems that these desires, these feelings, their value is just in themselves. I don't seek to like go on a yacht trip or something. I mean, I can't anyways, but let's say I don't seek to go on like some like resort or retirement place other than just for fulfilling my desires. Like, I'm only doing it for comfort. I'm only doing it just so I can enjoy that moment a little bit more. There's no other goal there. This is kind of the mindset that, I mean, we all really live in. We all kind of maybe even believe in. But then prophethood comes, and it kind of gives us a very different approach to this. It doesn't say your desire is just for a desire. That's all it is. I mean, we've been kind of saying this with the verse, but prophethood, when it comes, Imam Nursi, he writes this quote, kind of, I want to read it, but it's kind of talking about the Abs, or it's talking about the people who follow like the prophet. It's saying by knowing their impotence, by knowing their weakness, they seek refuge with divine power. So this, when I'm weak, that means it's like a need of me to seek refuge with divine power, by seeing their weakness to rely on divine strength, by realizing their poverty to trust in divine mercy, by perceiving their need to seek help from divine riches, by seeing their faults to ask for pardon through divine forgiveness, and by realizing their deficiency, their problems, to be glorifiers of divine perfection. Like, the approach of prophethood is completely different. It kind of flips the script. All these things that we're trying to run away from, like that path of philosophy we would say to run away from, like you feel impotent, you feel weak, you think you're poor, you have faults, you have deficiencies. Like, these are things that, go cover those up. Don't think about them, ignore them, don't use them. Try to go amass like some wealth so that now you think you're not poor. Like, this is what maybe the mindset we have, because we are asking from wealth itself. We are asking from our boss. We're asking from, let's say, people rather than from our creator. But then the path of prophethood, it comes and it gives this, I guess, guideline, or this process by which we use all of these needs, separate needs, for, like, they all point to something. They don't just stay by themselves. Like, if I feel weak, then that's an invitation to now ask from a divine strength. Or if I feel like I have deficiencies, those deficiencies I have, those problems I have, those issues in my life that, why can't I get better? Why do I keep doing that? Instead of using that to like say, oh, I suck, I can't do anything, or, I need to ignore this. No, take that deficiency and now go before your creator with that. So what does this have to do with, let's say, desires, let's say? Going to the topic of appetites, desires, in just the same vein, these desires allow me to feel these deficiencies I have, or because I have because I'm not a rock, because I have these needs, these desires, these feelings, very complex feelings. I have greed, jealousy, I have all of these different things. Because of that, I am able to feel poverty. Because of that, I'm able to feel like I did something wrong. Like all of these are ways, richnesses for me to be able to see things I have needs in. Like if I have a need, and then I then go and ask from the one who can provide that for that need. And here is this two doors. So I think we did touch on it, but I do want to hear Atik's voice. So could you talk about what does a door mean? Like what are these doors?
I guess the doors would refer to the two paths, the path of prophethood and the path of philosophy. So I would have a question for you.
Okay. Sure.
So Imam Nursi says that the path of philosophy considers the I's duty to be the perfection of the self, which originates from the love of the self, and so is there something wrong with trying to be the best version of yourself? Like being the best in your field, most accomplished, or being the most capable or reliable? Are these bad qualities?
Yeah. So like when we're talking about prophet, we're like, realize your weakness, realize your problems, your deficiencies, use these as ways to connect with your creator. But then let's say philosophy comes and says, be perfect, work on yourself. You can do it. You can achieve it. You're amazing. You just gotta believe in yourself. All these self-help kinds of things. Like don't have any negative thoughts. Don't let anyone get in your mind. And it might sound a little nice, but as Nursi says, this is you consider your duty as perfecting yourself, like perfection of the self out of self-love. Because you love yourself, you want to perfect yourself. You see yourself as the one that can fulfill something, as the one that can sustain something. Like rather than, like we were saying, rather than asking for help, you say, I don't need help. I am enough for myself. I can do it by myself. I can figure it out by myself. This is kind of what they're telling you to do with these self-help, finding perfection in yourself. But as a human, I mean, maybe you can deceive yourself for a little bit, but as a human, you know very quickly how weak you are. You know very quickly how little control over the world you have, how little you know about your future. Like if you have a desire for the future, like you're like, would I be able to do it? I don't know. I don't have control over it. Like something as little as a virus can come, or you can crash that day, or something else can happen, and your whole world can be shattered. So you know because how weak you are, because you're honest with yourself. You know that you can't live your life finding, like seeing yourself as the one that's going to provide for you. Like I will do it by myself. I will figure it out. I am enough for myself. So this is the love of the self that they try to sell to us. They try to make us believe in loving yourself. And the opposite side of it is when I can't, like let's say at university, I can't do well enough in my grades. I'm failing this, or maybe I get a bad grade. I'm like, oh, why did I do that? Why am I so stupid? Why couldn't I do it? Love of self turns to hate of self very quickly, because again, you're looking at yourself for results. You want it from yourself. But in both of those scenarios, if you use the door of prophethood, let's say, these doors where these feelings of need turn into doors, they're not just like closed, I guess, but rather you open them and it takes you somewhere. Then those needs, they take you to the one who's able to fulfill those problems you have. Like I say, guide me, help me, do this, do that. And I know they can do it. They're capable of doing it. If I went to Atik and I said, hey, I have this serious issue, can you help me? Maybe he'll try. But I mean, he's a human. He has his own problems. He has certain limitations of power. Like there's not much comfort he can give me. But if I go to my creator who created everything, who is creating everything, who is providing for me, I can find comfort there because I know it's all in his hands. Yeah. Do you have something else to say?
No, I can ask you another question.
I think we can go to istighfar
Okay.
as well.
Sure.
Okay, I can dodge this question.
Yeah.
So next slide. So we have 6 minutes, I think. So yeah, just going back to this verse. I think this verse, it's just let it, I guess, just like ruminate in our minds. But like, it's asking, Quran is our creator is asking us a question. Have you seen the one who takes as his God his own desire? Ask yourself this, and ask yourself this throughout the day. Do you take your desires as God? And just let it ruminate. You probably don't even know about some ways you do, but then you're going to do something like, oh, I was taking it as my God. I was asking from that desire. And now this verse is teaching me. And finally, istighfar, in the path of the straight path, or like trying to find a straight path. I think istighfar plays an amazing role. So I'll hand it off to you.
You guys try to.
Yeah, istighfar. Sarah, our resident.
Istighfar, it means to ask for forgiveness. Yeah, to ask for forgiveness. I guess that's the literal meaning.
Yeah, so I guess just to segue into this section, I feel like when we think about sort of these animal appetites or desires, we think about, falling into extremes, like indulging too much in something or just like cutting oneself off. But oftentimes I feel like this isn't really the case. So oftentimes I think we might find ourselves, maybe kind of veering off a little bit. Like it doesn't feel like we've completely fallen off this path or like or have done something that's, totally, completely haram, and sort of just wanted to bring attention to this quote from Imam Nursi. Moreover, man's soul always listens to Satan, and his powers of anger and animal appetites are like both receivers and transmitters of Satan's whisperings. The greatest gift, and this is a bit later in the text, but the greatest gift he bestows on the prophets is forgiveness, and he calls on them to seek forgiveness. So this idea of sort of, we have this external factor now of, these whispers, or in Arabic, the waswasul. So sometimes, I feel like it might feel like, I'm doing something correctly, but then I might be tempted by something. I might hear these whispers, like it's not such a big deal if you like eat a bit more food if you like it so much. Like you're still young and healthy, like go for it. So in that sense, like maybe I won't feel like what I'm doing is something that's like off the Sirat al-Mustaqim, or maybe it's something I feel like I can easily come back to. But I guess maybe the point here is that, sometimes we do see ourselves giving in to these desires, and like maybe thinking about how does like istighfar actually, how does that help us? And so I guess, this is part of like our training and our test, being able to sort of recognize these temptations or these whispers. And as like Abdurrahman was saying earlier, like the goal is not to like make this perfect version of ourselves, but to rather ask, to be thankful, and to ask from our creator who knows us the best and knows all of our desires and appetites, to forgive us and also help us, like we were saying with the verse of إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. So really treating this as sort of as treating the istighfar as an opportunity to sort of redirect ourselves, I think is sort of the main points here. And Yeah, I
Is
guess
it
the
is it wrong to make mistakes and slip up, or should we have been perfect all along?
So from my understanding, I would say the expectation is that we are going to make mistakes, and that, you know, we're not perfect, and we won't reach that level. We won't be able to reach like perfection in sort of this existence. But rather, I think it's more about sort of being honest with ourselves when we've like done something wrong and being able to see that. I think Abdurrahman made this point earlier, that kind of stuck with me, about really seeing what you've done wrong as something wrong. Because I think that's something I first and foremost struggle with is, you know, what if if istighfar is this easy, basically, what if I just take it as, oh, I can give in to this one desire, say astaghfirullah, and then I'm back on the straight path. But it doesn't work that way, because, you know, have I actually realized sort of what I've done wrong? So I think, you know, the purpose of making mistakes is to teach us, you know, what's wrong. Like a multiple choice question on an exam, you have the correct option, but you also have these other options that are not correct but may seem correct, and it helps you learn to distinguish what is true from what's false. So I think this sort of distinction is important.
So through istighfar, we're not just covering up or erasing a mistake that we made, but we're gaining maybe the correct answer, or we're getting something out of it. We're making progress, maybe closer to the straight path. And I guess there's a point to make about tawbah, which is maybe a essential aspect of istighfar, of making forgiveness, is tawbah, which is to maybe linguistically redirecting yourself, turning yourself around. So if you have istighfar and you're not committed to, you know, directing yourself to the proper path and to leave whatever mistake you had behind and, you know, live a correct life, then maybe your istighfar needs some work.
Yeah, and I guess concluding remarks, before I go to the next slide, I think it's amazing that he says the greatest gift he bestows on the prophets is forgiveness. Like the prophetic path, the greatest gift there is seeking forgiveness. And like that kind of displays what is seeking forgiveness. It's realizing, oh, I made a mistake. I wasn't like what I worshipped or what I idolized before was actually not worth idolizing. I had to break it, or because I finally hit rock bottom, it gets broken for me. So then I'm like, you are my creator. That thing before I was following didn't satisfy me. So now you're sincere there. And now you're asking for help. Help me go back on the straight path. That's what istighfar is. And it is a beautiful gift given to the prophets. And I think finding the straight path almost necessitates that we're going to get off the straight path and we need to use istighfar to come back. And just ending, and I think we're right on time, but 3 main points to get from this presentation is, you know, the straight path is kind of in worship, like using those desires, those feelings, those needs for worship places you on the straight path. Finding perfection through the creator rather than the self. Like don't look to yourself or even others for perfection. Perfection is through the creator, seeing the names of the creator. And lastly, asking forgiveness. And I think we are out of time, so no questions. You had, okay, because I like you, I'll let you say one.
Going back to the earlier questions that you guys had at the beginning of the slide, so are there any desires that we have to avoid at all costs, or can we fulfill all desires in some sort of moderation?
I think, okay, I'll give what I understand. I mean, of course, there's going to be some actions or some things you avoid, but you're not avoiding the desire itself, I think. Like the desire, I think the first way of avoiding is not reading it or not like seeing the purpose behind it. If you get a desire and you just act accordingly, like you get a desire instantly, you just do whatever the desire tells you to do, then I would say no matter what, you should avoid. Like you shouldn't be like that, because it's not reading. Then you're like living like an animal. So that part, I would say definitely, even if like you have this feeling of helping someone, if you just go and help someone, but you think, oh, I'm the one that helped them, I gave them something, oh, I'm a good person. Like, what did you really gain there? You thought now you are the one who creates this like mercy. You're the one who is merciful. So there's not even something to gain there. I think the first step is reading this desire I have in me. Like, why is it there? What's it telling me? And then if it's something like to hurt someone, if let's say, God forbid, you have such a desire, then you sit down and say, what does this mean? Why do I have this desire? Then does it make sense? Is it true? Is it not true? So I think the first step is reading these things. I would say avoid just acting, whatever your desire says, don't just act according to it. So that's what I would say, avoid at all costs. Since you're the moderator, I guess.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think you might have touched upon this. I stepped out for a tiny bit, but that almost, let's say 99% of the desires that are given to us, eating, drinking, desires towards, like family life, what have you, sleep, various comforts. I would say almost all of them, if not all of them, in fact, we are given certain parameters in which they can be fulfilled, right? And living within those parameters is recognizing the desire doesn't belong to me, it was given. The ability to fulfill them doesn't belong to me, it was given. The thing fulfilling them doesn't belong to me, also given. So living within those parameters, right? Living, as we say, within the halal parameters, within the Sharia, right? Becomes living in awareness of God. That choice to live within those parameters is my act of worship, right? So I just wanted to add that as well. And I'm sure that like during the breaks between the sessions, when we're not doing the daily prayers, there can be continued discussion.
So unless someone is dying to make a final remark, I will end it here. Okay, jazakallah khairan. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وآخر دعواهم الحمد لله رب العالمين الفاتح.